Hello and welcome. This is going to be part two of my Sasquatch build. In part one, I talked about creating the AI generated image of the Sasquatch, go through the prompts that I used. And then I talked a little bit about modeling resolution versus your project size and why it matters. Then I talked a little bit about system requirements on your computer. Creating images and 3D components and stuff like that is requires a lot of computational power on your machine. So you would definitely want to have a graphics card that has a GPU that can be accessed through Aspire. And then I created the outline around them, the image, the bust, and cropped everything outside of it off. Then took that bitmap image and created a component from it, which we'll use as a skin to overlay the model. Will build all the components, the composite of all those components to give it some non-cartoon looking aspects. And this is it. Let's get into this. Okay, so this is the first thing I do when I look at the image, and we're going to create this model. Aspire is a additive or foundation building from modeling program where you build a foundation, you add parts on top of it or merge it in two sections. You have the tilt and the fade capability to blend it between the component below it, and so it's additive. Now, with that in mind, I look at this image, and what do you see as geometrical forms that we can build on to make these components? First thing that looks at me for a foundation is the beard. You know, we can build the beard and then throw the head on top of it, then the eyes on top of that, paste the ears in, the nose, and the mouth. So the first thing I'm going to do, by the way, this is where we left off in part one. Okay, before we jump into these vectors, I want to share a technique or an exercise I do in my mind's eye to help me visualize what I'm trying to do. I look at all those components, the head, the eyes, the ears, nose, eyebrows, mouth, and what geometric shapes in the real world existed, sort of simulate that. I think of the head itself as maybe an egg. Ears, maybe seashells, scallop. Nose, elongated pyramid with two cave entrances. Eyes, they're kind of tough to put in an analogy. The best I can come up with is maybe grapes partially buried in the sand, and that sand is sort of in a recess. Eyebrows, cheekbones, lips, I sort of think of as macaroni noodles. Now that I got those physical things in my mind's eye, I think the egg is more like Jello, and I have to try to embed these components into it to get pretty close to that. And how far do I embed these things? That's just a visualization, conceptualization, just some technique for me to help build these components. I use it occasionally, and sometimes it helps, and sometimes, well, you know, we all start somewhere, and that might be a little tool you'll have to help you conceptualize. But you'll find a way. The more you get into it, you'll come up with a way. Okay, with that said, let's get into vectors. So the first vector I'm going to create is the head. And how to do that is I'm going to highlight this layer and actually duplicate it. Then we'll rename that as head demo. Change its color a little bit, that's different. We're right here, so let's go to gold. And now that's active. Interesting thing that you want to see here is the order of precedence that affects layers. The lower this layer is in the stack, the software can't put two colors on top of each other. So it needs to know which one has precedence. So if I moved it above this other highlighted one, you see that the red becomes more dominant than the one we just moved above it. But moving it back just below it, it's now the orange, gold, whatever color. This got precedence. So here we go. And what I'm going to do is go back to our polyline, create that. And where does the head start? I'm going to create a vector about right here and just go down, 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 around to the chin, and bam, done. Escape, get out of that. Back to layers, turn off the bitmap, and the part's already selected. I'm going to go into node editing. I'm going to highlight all these vectors and hit S to smooth it. And dang, that doesn't look too good, does it? Turn on that bitmap layer again. And see how it sticks out beyond the ear. So I'm just going to slide that over so it gets smoother. And now that we can do this in 3D view, it's kind of helpful. Slide that out a little bit. A couple dashes on the arrows. Get rid of this little weird transition. And yeah, I highlight just that node. No, I can't do that. That's a misnomer of what it can do. So right here, turn that in a little bit, zoom in some, just to get this looking more. Chin's not so cool. Let's see if we can bring this one down a little bit. By the way, I want to turn off my geometry so I can put these where I want them without them snapping to a general spot. And turn that in like this a little bit. Okay. That's beginning to look pretty good. So let's exit that. Node editing mode. Turn off the bitmap. I have this layout line right here, which goes right through the center. I'm going to take this. Vector's already in transform mode. Control H, Shift H, Control Shift H, should make a copy, right? Let's see. Control Shift H, there we go, there's a copy. Let's see what that looks like. Looking sort of like a head. Maybe the jawbone right up at the top here, a little bit high. One reason I don't like to copy it across is it creates more symmetry. How does this look compared to the bitmap? Yeah, the cheeks are sticking out too much. So let's turn that off a little bit. Delete this guy. Delete it. Modify this one a little bit. Back to node editing. Give that a dash with the arrow key. Straighten this out a little bit. Twist it. Bring it in. Exit node editing. Highlight in transform mode. Control Shift H. Bam. There we are. What about the temple area? Does that look good? Yeah, I think it's good enough. Okay, we'll start with that. Let's close this off, and we can always modify it later. So let's close this loop. I'm going to highlight this guy. I'm going to go back to node editing. This is the outline. I'm going to zoom in real close to here, and I'm going to cut this vector right there. Got lucky. It's right on the spot. Let's come back, slide over to the other side, see if that one's there. So I'm going to insert a point. I'm going to cut the vector here, and I'm going to delete. Just get rid of everything outside of that. Turn off the outline. And now I'm going to put this one into node editing mode, which is slide it up to here. And back into design mode, zoom out. And move up. Turn off node editing mode. Select all these vectors. Go into join. We have 4 open vectors. We're going to have 1 closed vector afterwards. Join. That's the head. I know I told you I was going to start with the beard foundation, building up and go from there. Hang on to that thought. I'll show you the conceptualization later. I'll show you why I didn't do it that way. Okay? That's just the vector. We'll go into component creation in the next video. So, file and save, and we'll do the next component. Okay, so you can see that the head is a very simple vector. The next 2 are going to be very simple too. Single vectors per. The eyebrows and the cheekbone. The single vector mirrored over to the other side. And the others, the nose, the mouth, the ears, and the eyes, require many vectors to create them. So let's get into that. Let's turn off the head, and we will go to the eyebrows. Go back to the polyline, and we'll start outlining the eyebrow. Sort of see it overlapping. Just quickly go around here. And tab to close. Close this. Highlight the vectors. Go to node editing. Select all the nodes and hit the S key. Smoothing. Okay. Let's turn off node editing. Zoom in here real close. See how it looks. We can tighten that up a little bit. So node editing again. Scoot this guy in. That's pretty good. This is too high. Same here. And I want to twist this up a little bit. I think I'm okay with that. Node, copy. Select off, turn off the bitmap. Select the vector. Control Shift H, mirrored it to the other side. Bam. There's the eyebrows. Turn that off and back on with the bitmap. We'll do the cheekbones next. So let's create a cheekbone layer. Add a new layer. Cheekbone demo. And color. See, the original was sort of a blue. Let's give it some similar but contrasting. And sort of move it up close to here. And let's go back. Let's create that one. Here. So once we get going, which is created, and tab to close. Close this. Node editing. Highlight. S smooth. And see what that looks like. It's looking pretty good. This guy can come in a little bit. Let's get in there. Straighten this out a little bit. Slide her out, that part out. How's it look? Does it look pretty smooth? This can probably come in. This can probably come down. And turn off node editing to see how smooth it looks. We okay here. Seems it's going to merge in with the nose, so I'm not so worried about that. And we'll find out when we create the component how much this little section here seems to be too proud. I should probably come down a little bit, but we'll find out later. So highlight it, Control Shift H, and let's zoom out. Should have another copy over there. And let's see, what does that look like? We'll turn off the bitmap layer and turn on the eyebrows and head. We're getting there. Okay. Okay, the next components we're going to make are going to be turned into composites. Composites is vectors terminology for multiple vector or components to make another component. Hence, composite of multiple components. So, for the sake of time's speed, I'm not going to create all the vectors. I'm going to highlight the vectors that are of interest and try to explain how come I made what I did. And the first thing is composite we're going to make is the nose and then the ear. So the nose, we started out with a triangle right here surrounding the bridge. This is inside the edge of what you would say is the nose. And the reason is when this is created, the sharp edges will get a draft added to them. But before we do that, I need some cropping vectors to remove this part. We don't want the nostril area to be created. So the next vector is this cropping set of vectors. And it will remove material. Then the next vector after that, turn that off, is creating the nostril area. These are just going to be domes, and from there, the next piece will be the nostrils, which will be a dish going in, and then because we're going to add a draft to the nose triangle, pyramid, I put a cropping vector here because when this tip of the nose gets pushed out, I want to crop it to the right size. The next vectors we're going to create are going to be the ear. And let's get into here. First vector is going to be the outside. We're going to create a round component, or maybe a flat. We'll see what happens when we get into there. And then we're going to add on top of it the top of the nose or ear, and then create a little recess for this part of the ear. And we're going to add more meat to the edge of the ear, the back of the ear, and we're going to create this ridge right here. And then the last one is this little ridge right here. And how come I didn't do vectors for these ridges? It's simple because we're going to add the skin on top of it, and it'll have some texture to it. And when we evaluate that, we'll determine if that's enough. If it isn't, we can always go in with the sculpting tool and add. We'll paint on some material there to get the right contour to match the image. Those are the composites. The next set of vectors we'll create will be the no longer closed vectors. They will be open vectors, and we'll use the two-rail suite. And that's going to be for the mouth region and the eyes. Okay, the next vectors I'm going to talk about are the mouth. This is a two-rail suite that I used. It's composed of the upper lip, two vectors here. Oh, this is an extra one. I did not use it in the final. excuse me, get out of there. Here. And here. And notice that the start node is on the left. And then I created this profile for it to sweep across. Then the lower lip was this vector and this vector. And how did I create those? I used that layout line in the middle and started from the middle and used the poly tool just to create the shape. As I usually do, go back in and turn all the nodes into smooth, which creates Bezier spans, and adjust it to fit nicely in it, in the image. Then I take a copy and flip it about the center of the image and combine those lines together. And that is how the mouth was created. Okay, we're almost done here. So if you remember in the overview, if you saw part 1, I showed you the face and how it had these ridges. And since recording that, I went and thought about there's got to be a better way to get these eyes right without having to worry too much about the ridges being sculpted away. And I'll show you the approach that I took. What we got here is the head and the bitmap around the head. So what I did was take some vectors and you'll see here there's 2 rails for the sweep all the way across the head, and using the cross-sectional vector creator, I went from the top to the right, went from the middle point, the vector midpoint, to the other side, made certain they were horizontal, and also did the same on the bottom. And that's my vectors for the contour of the head. Then we can turn off the component and the bitmap here. Then I added the eyes, pupils actually, and the brow nose region, give it some depth. You know, the whole thing is we're trying to create some depth with this sweep that's going to run across the 2 rails. To accent it even further, we needed to create the eyelid, and we look real close into here. I outlined the image, and I did an offset out. Then created a pocket or a vector to create the socket area, to recess into that head. That way, you know, the eyes look realistic. That was all the vectors for the eye. And it made it a lot cleaner with not having to do so much sculpting. Sculpting is not a problem until it's a problem. You know, you got to keep your power levels low until you get comfortable with what you're doing. And still intimidates me to this day. I'm intimidated a bit. I don't go willy-nilly into it or whatever. So, in overview, this is the creation of all the vectors that created this Sasquatch. I appreciate you hanging out and following along. And like I said last time, the next video will be creating the components and composites of the Sasquatch head. It's a cool project, I thought. Thanks for watching, and until next time, a week, maybe a little more. Cheers.